Thank you, Dr. Chaitra. This audience seems to be quite, learned. I was very happy to see a lot of answers coming up. I'll also copy Professor Amod Gupta. I have copied in him various, clinical things, and he is a teacher of teachers, as I called him. So I'll also try to make this session interactive. At the outset, let me wish all the young people sitting here a very happy and prosperous, healthy 2015. I'll be talking something about endophthalmitis, which is a cause for worry to every operating surgeon. Persons who operate, they will encounter, sometimes reaction or infection, and you keep confusing whether it's a reaction, infection, and sometimes appropriate treatment has not been done. In fact, a long time back, when I was in RP Center, I had conducted one study on first contact management of endophthalmitis, and therein what we found was more than 85% of patients do not receive the appropriate treatment, and had they received, I think a lot of eyes will get salvaged. Endophthalmitis, as the name says, it's a disastrous kind of complication. It could happen whenever there is a cut in the eye, outer courts of the eye, when there is a cut, that means after surgery or even injection, or when there is a trauma, or it could happen without that, that is endogenous kind of endophthalmitis. And as I said, you see for post-operative or post-traumatic endophthalmitis, what you require is two C's. One is a cut, the other is colonies. Colonies, I have listed here that for a less virulent organism like Staph epidermidis, vis-a-vis Pseudomonas, even few colonies are good enough to cause a full-blown picture of endophthalmitis. So hence the concept of what we call colony-forming units is there. This is what all of us aim for, all cataract surgeons. But as soon as any patient comes, you see, I am fond of doing, as soon as patient sits on the examination chair, after doing a cursory torsional examination, do a distant direct. That means glow has to be pretty uniform and good. If the glow is not there, I think your tentacles go up, that there is something wrong somewhere. Dilate the pupil, see the glow with the help of distant direct. Even one case, if it occurs, although end of incidence has come down drastically with the use of disposable things and betadine and isolating the lashes and using disposable instruments. But believe me, one case to a surgeon who operates is very, very stressful. If I have case today, I wouldn't be standing here. And if you have series of cases by large, cluster endophthalmitis, I don't know, still cluster endophthalmitis keeps occurring. In November, December, we still had, you see, cluster endophthalmitis report from Calcutta, from Chennai, even from Delhi. So cluster endophthalmitis is maddening, and you have to close the OT and find out why did it occur and how to tackle this. So whenever anybody has infection in the eye, two things, especially in post-operative patients, we fear that the end result should not go like this. So all of us should be very much energetic in treating. Treat it on Saturday itself, treat it on Diwali day, holy day, don't postpone till Monday or the next, because we are afraid that patient eyes should not become physical. And second thing which we are worried nowadays more and more, thanks to our colleagues who keep saying, "Ye operation kahan se kara liya?" So you see, are worried about conviction and penalty and a lot of court cases going on. In anybody's situation, endophthalmitis is a disaster. If you don't manage in time, if you don't manage properly, and if you keep persisting with drops or subconj injections and keep fooling yourself, the result is like this, which I call murder of the eye. The eye gets murdered like this. The key issues always are delay. Infection, can occur, but delay should not be there. And one delay is because people are not willing to accept that my case, mere case mein infection kaise ho gaya? How come? And second is hesitancy in giving appropriate treatment, depending on things which don't work so well in endophthalmitis. And we have to differentiate, non-infective versus infective. The reason being, TAS, which is toxic anterior segment syndrome, is non-infectious, whereas endophthalmitis is infectious, and the pathogenesis and treatment modalities are vastly different. Whereas in TAS, we totally depend on steroids. We load the patient with steroids and cycloplegics and monitor this patient, whereas endophthalmitis by definition is infectious, and then we have to treat with intravitreal antibiotics or vitrectomy. This patient who was, was being treated with inflammation turned out to be infection, and we had to ultimately do vitrectomy also before giving intravitreal antibiotic injection. This lady who was referred in an emergency had already RK done somewhere, and an eventful cataract surgery, was referred for an urgent vitrectomy, but ultimately we treated only with steroids, and it was a pure inflammation. So TARS is a non-infectious inflammation of the anterior segment. Everything is confined to the cornea or the anterior chamber. Where an exact incidence TARS, because TARS, every post-op patient has some degree of TARS, and signs and symptoms do improve with routine kind of treatment. And finding an etiological factor is a challenge, because causes could be varied, right from viscoelastic to endotoxins to phaco handpiece not being sterilized properly, or talc. So many things, preservatives, all these things have been reported to cause toxic anterior segment syndrome. What is important for everybody to realize is TARS develops very acutely. Next day, within 12-24 hours, you will have a diffuse haze in the cornea, limbus to limbus corneal edema, and IOP, in contrast to infectious pathology by and large has a slightly, because of uveitic element, a slightly lower side, although it can have higher also, but by and large most patients have slightly lower IOP, whereas TARS will generally have normal or raised. Endophthalmitis, as you know, by definition, it includes two components: inflammation of the inner course of eyeball with exudation into vitreous cavity. Vitreous cavity involvement by and large is a must in infectious pathology, and it could be early if it is very virulent, or sometimes fusarium can present as acute endophthalmitis, or it could be subacute chronic. Although you see in the West, in the EVS study, the preponderant was gram-positive coagulus negative, but in our country, believe me, fungi and gram-negative are much more commoner than has been reported in the West. This patient who was being treated as uveitis ultimately turned out to be full-blown endophthalmitis. So these are some parameters which may help us to decide whether it is infectious versus non-infectious. Like sir was saying, chemosis. Chemosis does not occur in TARS. Chemosis is a feature of infection, is a feature of infectious endophthalmitis. Similarly, drastic drop in vision to the level of PR inaccuracy will generally occur in infectious pathology. And I pay a lot of attention to whatever you see in the vitreous cavity. If it is whitish or in color, the diagnosis tilts in favor of some inflammation going on in the vitreous cavity. Or if it is yellowish, then you think of infection. So these are the same features which are listed here: lid edema, chemosis, usually absent in TARS, but present in infectious pathology. Pain may not be, present in all patients of infection, but if it is present, it could be severe. Here it is very mild or not there pain. Corneal edema is limbus to limbus here. It is localized, and B scan, if you have given enough time for the clumps to form, then vitreous opacities you may see or pick up on ultrasound. So any patient who has this unusual pain, more pain than expected, because all of us have to be familiar with whatever trauma we have caused during surgery, vis-a-vis what result we see on day one. If there is unusual reaction, unusual pain, lid edema, chemosis, hypopyon or exudates, think in terms of infection and don't postpone the treatment. As I said, the first post-op day, there could be increased pain than what you expect or what you are used to listening to your patients. Therefore, it is always very important that you should be familiar on slit lamp what reaction you should expect. If it is more than that, then you think of infection. Pain may be absent in 25% patients of infectious endophthalmitis. Decreased glow is one of the most sensitive, may not be specific, but very sensitive sign. And subsequently, if you see exudates in the vitreous cavity, then the diagnosis is short endophthalmitis. However, all patients may not show all these telltale signs of vitreous exudates and hypopyon. So then what we do is that we try to dilate this pupil, see the vision, and then decide whether this patient requires intraocular antibiotics or not. Like if the vision is very poor, less than say 6/60, AC reaction is marked, and pupil does not dilate, then most of these patients, I don't hesitate to give intravitreal Vanco and ceftazidime and give him the benefit of doubt that this could be an infectious pathology. So after having, suspected endophthalmitis, after having differentiated infection from TAS, what should be the initial management of endophthalmitis? I'll describe 5-6 case scenarios here. This is one case scenario which I had described before. Here we distinguish between TAS and infection. This is patient who had on day, when he presented day 0, that this patient had unusual kind of reaction and was treated with intensive steroids, and gradually patient improved over the course of 2 weeks and came back, media became clear, vision improved gradually. This is the same lady which I had shown before, patient who had RK done. This patient again was referred for vitreous surgery but was treated with intensive steroids, topical and even oral, and gradually pupils started dilating, and you could see the media becoming clearer, and over the course of a couple of weeks this patient stabilized and became virtually normal. Situation number 2 is when on your examination as well as investigation you have concluded that this patient does deserve intraocular antibiotic injection. If you have thought of, please give this injection immediately as early as possible, even on Saturday, and result will be pretty good by and large if the organisms are responsive. What to give, when to give, I think this has been discussed often, and this has been very well summarized in that AIS CME series which came out a couple of years prior. The moment you see patient of TAS which are following up, suppose it worsens in the evening or next day, again you should give intraocular antibiotic injection. Situations where intraocular antibiotic I am hesitant are situations like fungal endoph or traumatic endoph, where or the first intravitreal injection does not work. I am not very fond of repeating, again injections, because the threshold for vitreous surgery with microincision vitreous surgery, 23-25 gauge, you see we enter the vitreous cavity and debulk the vitreous with infection and then give antibiotic injection. So these 5-6 indications are primarily where results of surgery are much better compared to depending only on intravitreal injection. These 5 indications are generally for vitreous surgery. What to give, I think still, as of today, we still persist with one antibiotic for gram positive and one for gram negative, Vanco and ceftazidime, and simultaneously we hurry up to see KOH as well as gram stain. By chance we should not be missing out fungus, because if that is so, then antifungal agents, voriconazole is added. But if the patient is, say, of Pseudomonas or very virulent infection or post-traumatic patient, then my drug of choice initial is Vanco plus Amica, because Amica is more sensitive towards gram negative compared to Kefta. Because Kefta, when it came, it was very highly responsive towards gram negative. But as of now, reports, you see the sensitivity of Kefta to gram negative is to from 70% or so, compared to Vanco for gram positive is still above 90%. So these charts we hang in the operation theatre wall, and once we are preparing antibiotic injection, we have a look and we prepare the antibiotic injection and don't do blunders in preparing, especially the aminoglycosides. And decompression of the globe is required because we are giving 2 antibiotic injection. I can't take 0.2 ml without rise of pressure, so you have to decompress. And the best way to decompress is doing a biopsy in patients of suspected infection, because that gives the best kind of yield. But in case you are not familiar, then AC paracentesis, although the yield is less, but it does decompress the globe and does not pose any threat to the vitreous base. So don't try to aspirate vitreous too much if it does not come easily. And also it is recommended that you should have 2 separate syringes made rather than preparing in one syringe, and inject with the help of 30 gauge needle slowly without a jet formation. Also, topical treatment in the form of concentrated drops we usually give in the form of cefazolin, tobacin, and steroids normally, because of some fear of fungus, I normally add after 24 hours. This is the same patient who initially was being treated with uveitis, and this was turned out to be infection, and then we gave Vanco and Kefta. The improvement, mind you, in all patients of infection and endophthalmitis is slow. Initially the synechia will break, people will start dilating, then glow will come, and then you will have some improvement of vision. So patient and relatives have to be counseled that do not expect miracles happening from day one. Stabilization itself is a sign of if that patient is responding. What should we do if the patient does not respond as well as like this gentleman responded? So if patient does not respond or responds partially, then don't hesitate to do a vitreous surgery in such scenarios. So a lot of people, we don't try and give repeat intravitreal unless facility for vitrectomy is not available, or you can't do vitrectomy, or else by this time culture sensitivity report has come and the sensitivity pattern is different. Then only you can repeat. If patient has a very virulent kind of infection, where you see or the antibiotics have not worked, this gentleman who was one-eyed patient and had this ectatic kind of limbus hair. So we did the vitrectomy in the first go, and this patient ultimately gained vision of finger counting 2 meter. This patient underwent radical vitrectomy. I don't know why this video is not going, but we can skip that because surgery may not be. And ultimately this patient gained finger counting 2 meter. And vitrectomy, what normally we do is not the core vitrectomy, but a radical vitrectomy, meaning thereby once you enter vitreous cavity, try to remove as much vitreous as possible, and without compromising the integrity of the retina or the other structures, and try to depress also, if possible peel off the hyaloid. Don't leave any residue of infection near the ciliary body or the subhyaloid pockets, because that will prevent the recurrences of infection or persistence. Then the result will be pretty good. We'll skip these videos. Nowadays, most of us, do only 23 gauge vitrectomy in all these patients. Skip these videos. These are the result of very severe endophthalmitis. This is silicone-filled eye. This patient had gram-negative infection. This again is silicone oil reflexes after doing a radical vitrectomy with silicone oil injection. Another question is frequently, should we remove IOL during vitreous surgery for endophthalmitis or not? In mild patients of endophthalmitis, the answer is no, we should try to retain the IOL. But any patient who has severe infection, by severe infection I mean the infection has reached up to the retinal surface or is involving till the ciliary body area. This patient, normally we remove the IOL because otherwise you can't do a complete radical vitrectomy. Similarly, P. acne, where the offending organism is generally within the capsular bag, so you have to do a complete vitrectomy, take out the bag, and generally the IOL also. And recurrent patients who have not responded, again try to remove the IOL, do a base dissection. And fungal, however, you see antifungal agents are available, but generally most of the patients of fungal require vitrectomy or revitrectomy. So this is one patient who presented to us with corneal abscess here. This was the area of wound entry. So in this patient we did IOL removal, radical vitrectomy, and after couple of weeks, fortunate enough to have a reasonably okay result. Post-traumatic polymicrobial infections are more common. Also the injuries which carry soil and vegetable matter, the possibility of fungal should be kept in mind, although more common in rural setup. And the isolates generally are bacillus or staphylococcus. If the cornea is hazy, don't be in a rush to do a vitrectomy, because then you will do a messy job, you will not be able to do a total vitrectomy. So best in this scenario, if patient presents like this, what I normally will do is give an intravitreal injection first, wait for cornea to clear and put him on topical treatment, because if I take up this patient with vitreous surgery immediately, the complete vitrectomy generally is not possible and do a shitty job. Unless this patient is worsening, then only you should take up. How do we suspect fungal endophthalmitis? Either clinically or by seeing signs which are more, or it's a quiet eye, or the first intravitreal has not worked, then we start thinking it could be fungal, or the smear or KOH has made us wiser. Then, we take up this patient for vitreous surgery. Although you see voriconazole intravitreal we do try, but by and large, as I said, severe patient of fungal endophthalmitis do require vitreous surgery, and what I have seen is generally multiple vitreous, 2 or 3 vitreous may be required. And amphotericin B is a salvager in a lot of these eyes of fungal endophthalmitis. This patient had recurrent fungal endophthalmitis. I don't know whether video will work here or not, but primarily because the hyaloid was not peeled. So this patient already had multiple vitreous surgery done. The only thing which we did here was the peel the hyaloid. You would see subhyaloid pockets of pus here, which were loculated, and with the help of backflush needle, they will not come out till the time you remove this hyaloid membrane. And then after the removal of this hyaloid, then this patient did not have any recurrence at all. So it is important to peel off hyaloid. Even at the cost of creating some break somewhere does not matter, but infection is more important to tackle than the creation of this break. So do a radical vitrectomy, peel hyaloid. This is another patient of post-traumatic endophthalmitis with absolutely no glow, treated with radical vitrectomy. This is post-silicone oil removal. This is the remnant of the infection which was taken care of. This is another patient who refused surgery because she already had 2 vitrectomies done. Once she worsened, then we did a radical vitrectomy and could give her some vision back. The other situation is where patient is being treated with steroids and cycloplegics. Patient improves for some time, again comes back, again improves, again comes back. So this chronic recurrent courses, normally then we start thinking of some fastidious organism which is lurking somewhere in the eye and giving rise to bouts of infection again and again. And generally we suspect some P. acne. And in such situation, the usual injection inside the vitreous cavity may not help. So you have to go via limbus or via the pars plana and pierce the capsular bag and inject vancomycin inside the bag. Then it may work. Or if not, if patient has presented late, then you have to do a capsulectomy, or with or without IOL removal has to be done. So these 3 examples I will show. This patient of suspected P. acne who had actually YAG capsulotomy done and it became full-blown picture. This responded to Vanco and ceftazidime. It took a couple of weeks for her to respond. This patient required capsulectomy along with the inside the bag injection. And this patient ultimately we had to remove the entire bag along with the IOL for her to respond because already she had received multiple injections. So what we are doing is doing a vitrectomy here first. Then we make a tunnel at the limbus, mobilize the IOL, ultimately remove this bag IOL first, and once the IOL is out, then do vitrectomy with depression and take out all this capsular bag. If you leave behind any capsular remnants behind, again this patient will have multiple recurrences. So this was necessitated in this patient who already had received multiple injections of vancomycin. Other situation which is endophthalmitis becoming commoner is after Avastin, because Avastin is so frequently used by everybody. Recently, as I said, we had bouts of infection from spurious kind of Avastin which was there in the market, and this infection which occurs after intravitreal injection is generally very severe, primarily because we are injecting the inoculum directly into the vitreous cavity. And the results are not as great unless you intervene very early, and by and large our experience is vitrectomy is generally required in these scenarios. It could occur even after Ozudrex intravitreal injection also. But if you have cornea like this in a patient who is late presentation, then the prognosis is generally poor, and you have to take help of corneal colleague who may do a temporary keratoprosthesis, then you do a vitrectomy through the keratoprosthesis, then put in a graft. Or some people also advocate endoscopic vitrectomy, which is also becoming popular. So to summarize, what I have tried to discuss is how to differentiate between infection versus non-infection. Then with the help of some case scenarios, when and how of intravitreal injection should be done, and what if no response occurs or partial response occurs after injection. And then in a patient who has severe infection, vitrectomy should be undertaken very early. In a patient of fungal endophthalmitis also vitrectomy should be done pretty early. Post-traumatic endophthalmitis also we have discussed. Then chronic endophthalmitis in the form of P. acne, I have shown you a couple of examples. From the technique point of view, although video didn't work, but what we do is a modified AC clearance, not entering from the limbus, but from the pars plana, making a hole in the iris, and then doing clearance of the anterior chamber. And concept of radical vitrectomy, wherein you remove the entire vitreous along with hyaloid and do a depression vitrectomy also. And do not hesitate to remove, as I said, hyaloid and subhyaloid pockets of pus. And base dissection, to my thinking, is a must in all these patients who have very severe endophthalmitis or fungal infection. And silicone oil does help in this. A lot of severe, unfortunate eyes, it does help to salvage these eyes. A lot of newer antimicrobials are also coming up in the form of imipenem and meropenem in the dosage which have been listed here. But personally, do not have much experience except a couple of patients. But they should be considered in scenarios where usual interval antibiotics don't work. In this patient, we had tried Venco and Kefta, but did not work. So I added tablet, you see, Linozade. Fortunately for me, it worked in this patient. So you should be aware of new generation of antibiotics also. A few words about prophylaxis. I think a lot of you are aware of this powerful study by the Swedish group, where it was shown that if you, at the end of surgery, post-cataract surgery, inject cefuroxime, the rate of endophthalmitis comes down to a rate 22 times lower than what was prevalent in 2007. So this is a debatable point, but there are 3 antibiotics now available: vancomycin, cefuroxime, and moxi, which a lot of cataract colleagues, they inject at the end of surgery. So, ladies and gentlemen, key words are delay and delay. Don't delay. And if you suspect, you should immediately take some action, and early prompt treatment, whether in the form of injections, interval antibiotic injection, or vitrectomy, believe me, they give gratifying results and help salvage a lot of these eyes. And operation theatre, I think, we are all surgeons, should be treated like a temple, and person who does autoclaving for you should be, taken care of. How to tackle once there is a cluster infection? You see, if you have cluster infection, there is a media furor created, and everybody is after your life. You may have to, sometimes hide yourself, close the clinic. But believe me, what helps is make only 1% talk to the media, because they are very fond of, forcing you to speak something, and have a scientific dialogue that whenever there is a cut, bound to have bacteria inside sometimes, and it could result. Any cut, you see, people can have septicemia from intramuscular injection also. So you have to have a scientific dialogue with all these people. But please have a peer review and refer to higher centers, and please write down whatever has been done, because if you have written down, then you can be easily saved in this court of law. Thank you very much for your kind attention.